Hi, everyone. I'm just waiting for some of the other attendees to join us. So I'm just going to give this another minute before we start. And then I'll pass you on over to our authors of reflections. I'll just give this another minute.
Thanks, Rochelle.
I'll just do the introduction now so that we can start on time. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Rochelle. I'm part of the EDCO team. I just wanted to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded, so you will receive a copy of the link via email. For those of you who registered and also for those of you attending this evening, you'll receive an email with a copy of the webinar recording and also the PowerPoint presentation and other things that we're sharing with you this evening. For those of you who have any questions, you just need to pop them into the Q&A box, and we will try and address them later on after the presentation. And tonight we'll be talking about exam tips for junior psycho-religious education, which will be hosted by our reflections authors, Laurie and Niamh. So I'm going to pass you on over to now to them. Over to you, Laurie.
Great. Thanks, Rochelle. And thanks so much to the Educational Company for giving us the opportunity tonight to chat to you about exam tips for junior cycle religious education. So, as you know, my name is Laurie Fields Whelan, and I'm one of the co-authors of Reflections, which previously would have been A Question of Faith, which Niamh and I are both aware that a lot of you have been working from, especially if you've got third years at the moment. So I'm teaching 30 years. I graduated from Mater Dei in 1995, and it just seems like a blink of an eye. I graduated with history, religion, and since then I've trained as a guidance counsellor, and I'm also deputy principal. But I'm a teaching deputy principal because I absolutely love the classroom. It's where you get to know the students, and I just love the teaching kind of side to things. I teach in Manor House, and I've been there for all my teaching career. So it's an all-girls secondary school in North Dublin. So I have RE classes, as I've always had. So I look forward to tonight to sharing, myself and Niamh's expertise. We're looking forward to learning a few things from you as well. So hopefully you'll take things with you tonight that you can use in your classroom. And the last term is so short this year with Easter being so late. So we put together a booklet which we hope will help you as well. So we really hope you get a lot out of tonight, and we're really grateful to Educational Company, as I said at the beginning, for giving us this time. So I'll be back. I'm obviously here for the evening, but I'm just going to hand you over to Niamh. Thanks, Niamh.
Thanks, Laura. So hi, everybody. As Rochelle and Laurie said, so I'm Niamh McDermott, and myself and Laurie have been working together for too many years to count at this stage. I teach in an all-boys secondary school at the moment in Tullamore. I previously taught in an all-girls secondary school in Dublin, so I've had the experience of both the girls and the boys. This year, I currently have two third-year religion classes, so I am in the thick of preparing students for exams. So I suppose a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight does come from our own classroom experience. And the revision booklet that Laurie mentioned, we literally put that together in the last couple of weeks as we realised after our students did our mocks, and we started going through them with them in class, and we realised, okay, we need to do A, B, C, and D. So we'll make reference to both the question of faith and reflections. My current third years are still using a question of faith because that was the book they had, but I'm dipping in and out then of reflections as well, obviously, in the classroom. So look, we'll get going and say, look, we are all in the same boat waiting for our 2025 paper. What I found was having the two classes. So between the two classes, I have nearly 60 students. And look, no more than with any other subject, they're all making the same kind of mistakes when it comes to the exams. And at this stage, what I was saying to mine, like I've covered all the course nearly, and I'm sure most people are the same. And really, a lot of what I've done in the last, since the mocks, is what I always tell the lads is exam technique, okay? And it's trying to to focus their minds on how they approach the paper, because it's amazing the amount of marks they lose, silly marks, as I call them. So the first thing I would say is that you've got to be familiar. And I use the words from the specification in my classroom. And it was something that Laurie and I purposely did when we were writing all the books, was to use the words of specification, even in the chapter names in the book, so that the kids are familiar with them. So for example, years ago, let's say before the new spec came in, you might have called things, that a religious group or something. Now I'm saying religious organization, or when you see that word, that's what they mean. Like, it is a wordy spec. It is a wordy, the different strands, some of the words in it. So I always try and use, and I would advise everybody to do that, to use the word. So I would always say to them, when you see, for example, a time of significance, to make sure that they understand those words. I would always start off a class, or if we're doing a question like that, I'll say, give me another word for a time of significance, and they'll put up the hands. It's important, yes. So to try and put it into simple English for them, but that so that when they see those kind of key words from the spec, that they're not thrown by them. So I suppose one of the biggest mistakes that mine anyway were making was the whole action verb thing. And I've explained this to them, and what we spent the last few weeks doing, I went through the exam paper, the mock paper, and I said, I don't know about yourselves, we used the DB option B in my school. So I went through and I literally said, okay, question 1, I've now gotten them saying, tell me what the action verb is, and the hands go up and they'll say describe or explain. And it's just getting them to be able to identify that. And I've said to them, if you see an action verb like describe, some of the, explain, outline, they're the ones that require an awful lot more. Okay. They're the ones, because, and as we all know, it's ridiculous, there's no mark on the paper, which is crazy, but that's the situation we find ourselves in. But the action verbs are what's going to guide them on how much they should be writing. The most common action verb that is, sorry, I'm flicking now. Sorry, that's my fault. The most common action verb that was used in the 2024 exam was describe, okay? And it was used 10 times in the 2024 paper. And the range of marks for that year and the describe questions ranged from 8 marks to 15, but the average mark was about 11, okay? So what I've said to my students is, if you see the word describe, it's going to be minimum kind of 10, and it could go up as far as 15 in terms of what marks are available. So you're not going to get 13, 14, and 15 marks for writing 2 sentences. So the most popular, like I said, is describe. That was used 10 times. The second most popular one is explain. And again, that was action verb in the 2024 paper, was used 5 times. The range of marks, that goes a little bit lower, 6, but again, can go up to 15. And the third most popular was outline. So describe, explain, and outline. I'm saying to mine, look, you can get up as far as 15 marks. And when I went through the papers with them, their mock papers, and we read out a question, I had it up on the board and I said, okay, that was worth 15 marks. And you could see them all going, because they realized, oh my God, I only wrote 2 sentences for that. So I said, okay, you can see that you're not going to get 15 marks for 2 sentences. So let that be your guide. The other thing that I found when I said to them, how much did you write for that? They were saying to me, but I wrote loads. And I'd say, okay, read what you wrote. And they'd read out and they'd say, look, I wrote loads. And they might have, half the box filled in. And I'd say, okay, but what you've just read me is 2 sentences. So I'm always telling them now to count the sentences they're writing rather than the lines in the answer book, because they can waffle on in a big long sentence, but really that's one sentence that's perhaps saying one thing. And so the action verbs, I would say, are key. And I tell mine to circle or underline them when they read the question. The obvious other thing is that, they need to know the structure of the exam. I have it drilled into mine now. There's 3 sections, there's 15 questions. There is no choice. Again, that's something that's very different. Like years ago, we would have been used to them having a choice, in the old style papers. So now I tell them there is no blanks to be left. Guess, write down something, write down anything. Some questions are longer than others. So obviously the ones that, the matching questions, I'm always saying to them, make the match. Guess if you're not sure. But the longer ones then, you know, the length of the box, fine, you're filling a box, but count your sentences. If something is worth 15 marks, you're going to have to write a minimum of 5 sentences, let's say, if you want to be aiming up there in the higher bracket, okay? So like I said there, you can see they're getting to count the sentences they wrote, not the lines they filled. And you can see also in reflections that we've linked the learning outcomes at the end of every chapter. Again, having those learning outcomes printed in their book. And again, we hemmed and hawed about this when we were doing the book. We said, is it a bit much to have it? Do students really need to know? But they do, because that's the words in the exam come directly from the spec. So if they're not used to seeing those words in the classroom and in their books, it can throw them on the day of the exam. And the other thing, look, that I'm literally starting with, I say, okay, here's the question. Circle or underline. So now they're getting the action verb, right? We've circled or underlined that. Tell me what else you're going to circle or underline. So they've started getting better of it, even the last couple of classes I've had with them. At first, they were just throwing out any word in the sentence, you know, oh, underline that. I was like, no, think about this now. Important words. What is it you're underlining or whatever? And they're starting to get it now. And I said, it's so important for you to do that, because when you're writing your answer, particularly in those longer answers, if you kind of lose your train of thought, or you think, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, looking back at those words that are circled or underlined in the question will just bring them back to kind of focus on what they're supposed to be writing here. An example of that was in one of the questions that they did in their mocks. I think it was describe why prayer is important, something like that. And a lot of them wrote lovely descriptions about what happens during prayer in Islam, it was in that case. And I said, that's a really good description, but you haven't said why it's important. You've told me what happens in it. So the how and the why, I always draw their attention to as well, and say, you need to be sure what the question is asking you. Is it asking you how something is important or why it's important? So sometimes they kind of can go off on a tangent. They see one word and they go, oh, I know all about that. And they write everything, but they're not really answering what's been asked in the question. So your keyword, then your what or your why, or, you know, those kind of things. And then obviously the main point of the question. So is it, you know, to do with worship? Is it a building? Is it a feast? Is it, you know, whatever it is, religious belief being expressed, okay? So as I said, they're underlining and circling the keywords. And again, you will see these are 2 pages from reflections. We have drawn their attention. There are sample questions and sample answers given in the book. So for example, on page 139, you can see there on number 2C, outline 2 ways you can care about the earth. Again, I've just drawn my students' attention to the fact that if you're asked for 2 things, make sure they're 2 different things. You'll often find that they can repeat themselves, you know, one part of the question. They write everything they know, and then they realize, oh, I've said that already, and they just write it down again. So really important to get them reading the questions properly, carefully, taking that few minutes, and Laurie will talk about timing in a little while, but taking the few minutes at the start of each question to circle their words, underline their words, so that it just keeps them on track, okay? The biggest mistake, I don't know about your classes, but for mine, is that their answers are just not developed enough. And so what I did was, I did an example on the board, okay? So the question was to outline how a place of worship is important for members of one of the following world religions, so whatever world religion. So without opening our books, I mean, I'm saying to my classes, at this stage, you shouldn't be looking at, you should know the information. So I'm saying, right, off the top of your head, how or why is a place, you know, what is it about a place of worship that makes it important? So I said to them, what can they, members of a religion, do in a place of worship that they couldn't do, say, if they prayed at home? So it takes a little bit of, you know, dragging it out of at some times. And I literally just put those points that this actual thing was what my class came up with. Yeah, they said they can talk to God. So I said, okay, they communicate with their God. They were saying, oh, they can light candles. And I said, okay, so what are those candles? They can be symbols. So they were talking about, you know, they can look at holy statues and the things. So I said, okay, so there's symbols like statues and candles. What do they do? So it was about teasing out the answer that I'm always saying to mine, you know, yeah, you know, for example, they can light a candle, right? But what is that candle? It's a symbol. What does that symbol help them to do? Oh, it can help them to focus on their prayer. And loads of people go to mass on a Sunday, or not, as the case may be, whatever they say, people are there, right? So that means they are gathering with people in it, they feel part of a community. They can hear their sacred text being read. They'll say, oh, well, the priest reads out the gospel or whatever. Yeah, so that's coming from their sacred text. So they mention a priest being there. Well, they can learn from that religious leader. And somebody else might say, well, they can go there if they feel sad about something, pray for a loved one. So I'm just trying to get them to spill all the ideas. And I keep saying, is there anything else? Is there anything else? And I'm putting it all on the board. And when I put it on the board for this question that they'd done on their mocks, some of them had written maybe 2 or 3 sentences. And I said to them there, okay, it's a place to communicate with their God. There's symbols and statues. They can meet other believers. They can hear their sacred text being read. They can learn from their religious leader. They can get comfort. They can participate in rituals, and it can give them a quiet space. That's 8 points. So I said to them, that's 8 sentences, leaving aside your first sentence where you say, in the world religion, Christianity, their place of worship is a church, and it's important for Christians because. I said, then you go into your 8 sentences. And I have a drill they are sick of me saying. At the very end, go back and repeat the words of the question. I'm telling mine to literally repeat the words of the question. This shows how the place of worship, the church, is important for Christians to go to. All right. So I'm telling mine, and I really did notice that I'd obviously done this before the mocks, and of course, half them listened to me and half them didn't. But it was, we corrected our own mock. So even correcting them, it was, there was kids that maybe hadn't performed as well in exams before. And just by, they obviously took on board what I said about, repeating the question at the end of the answer. And it was amazing how their marks improved, because it just focused them back. And you could see that before they went to write it, they realized that that's what they had to write. And then they went, oh, I haven't said enough about that. So it's about drawing them out. I'm always saying to mine, ask yourself, is there anything else I can say about that? So I'm going to give another example, and maybe in the chat box. Rochelle, I know, has the chat box there. So if we did that process then with, if I was to say to my class, which I did, describe how prayer is important in one of the following world religions. So if anybody would like to just type something into the chat box and say, off the top of your head, no, if you had to say, how is prayer, why is prayer important in a religion? What does it do? I can't see the chat box. Laurie, can you?
No, but I think Rochelle is working on it there, Niamh.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually just made it available for people to put their answers.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant.
So communicate with God,
yeah, perfect, right? So I would write that up on the board. And what Sinead said there, to communicate with God, what I actually said to my students was, there are a couple of sentences that I've basically told them to learn off. So I've said to mine, if it comes up, why is a place of worship important to members of a religion? Or why is praying important for members? I said, you can use the same points. It brings them closer to their God, deepens their faith, as Anne said, brings them closer to God, deepens their faith, communicate, a way for them to communicate with their God. You can do that, use those 2 sentences for both a place of worship and for prayer. So I'm always saying to them, look, I'm trying to make this simpler on you. I'm trying to shorten down what you have to learn. Is there anything else that people would think, why or how is prayer important in a religion? So it brings people closer to God. It's a way for them to communicate with God. What else can prayer do for people in a religion? Putting you on the spot now. I feel like
I was just going to say that. We'll do a think, pair, share, Niamh.
Brilliant. To develop their relationship with God. Moral code. Yeah, that's another one. And a lot of mine came up with that. It could be part of their moral code that they have to pray. Give the person guidance. Brilliant. So if a person is looking for help with something, they can turn to their God in prayer. You're literally writing this on the board. Bring closer to God, deepen their faith. It could be part of their moral code. They can look for help. There's your 4 or 5 points. And that's without I say the lads all the time, because I teach all boys, that's without the lads looking at books or anything like that. they know this stuff, and I'm writing it on the board, and I'm saying, there you go. Communal prayer. Thank you, Aisling. If they go to a place of worship, they can take part in communal prayer, which is another point. So you've 5 or 6 points on the board, and I say, okay, lads, there's your 6 sentences. So from now on, you know, those questions where you see describe, explain, they should be 6, 7, 8 sentences long. And the students know the material. Sometimes you just kind of have to drag it out of them a little bit more. Okay. Thanks for everybody who contributed there. The other thing that I pointed out to mine, I said there are common mix-ups that happen every year. Again, I have had to drill it into them. A leader and a founder. So for example, in the mock paper, they were asked to name a leader, and a lot of mine went, you know, Buddha, Jesus, whatever. And I said, okay, you might get some marks for that, but again, go with the most obvious. So I said, they are founders. So a leader, you're going with the title. You see leader, think title, think Pope, Bishop, Archbishop, monk, imam, rabbi, whatever. So trying not to mix up leaders and founders. The other things that you obviously try and make really clear with them is the distinction between interfaith dialogue and ecumenism. So you have world religions versus the Christian religion and ecumenism. So it's dialogue and discussion. Another one that mine keep mixing up, and again, it's just at this point, we're all sick of it, but you're repeating yourself, you're drilling it into them. Founding story and creation story. A lot of mine saw founding story and they started writing about God creating the world. So important to make sure that they're aware of those distinctions. And again, it's a little bit of drilling stuff into them. If you see the word creation, there's your Big Bang Theory or your, you know, dependent or your religious one, the Genesis narrative. If you see founding story, then you're talking about the story of Jesus Christ or Siddhartha Gautama or whoever. So that's what I've been doing for the last, as I said, couple of weeks with my classes. Another tip that I actually just came across and I actually brought home with me yesterday, this came up in class, to try and because it is a huge course, like, let's be fair, for particularly for the students who would, you know, find remembering things a little bit more difficult. So students who may struggle. So for example, one of the questions they had on their mock papers in my class, the DEB one, describe how the work carried out by a religious or non-religious organization expresses its founding vision. But that was a tricky question. So if you get a question like that, what I said to mine was, okay, describe how the work carried out by a religious or non-religious organization expresses its founding vision. That's the question. So I said, right, what we're going to do is you're all going to pick 3 religious organizations. Some of mine left that blank, and I said, why did you leave it blank? I couldn't think, I didn't know religious organization. I said, did we learn about Throwbury? Yeah, that's a religious organization. Did we learn about St. Vincent de Paul or wherever? Yeah, that's a religious organization. So I said to them, okay, let's make this really simple. At this stage, you're cutting it down. I said, especially for those weaker students. So I said, right, choose 3. Choose Throwbury and try and choose ones that deal with maybe, a lot of them had done CBAs, say from second year, on Peter McBerry Trust. I said, okay, there's a religious organization, the Peter McBerry Trust. So I told them to pick, and we looked through our books and we said, okay, here's a list of religious organizations. You know, there was 10 or 12 in the book. So I said, just pick 3, know them really well. So if you see the word religious organization, you then know, that's where I use my trope or whatever. And what I said to mine was, so we're using A Question of Faith still, and the chapter on stewardship, and the group Arasha, the Christian group, so it's a religious organization. I said, pick that one, because if you're asked about anything to do with stewardship or care for the earth, and you're asked about work being done, there you go, there's Arasha. If it doesn't specify stewardship or care for the earth, you can still use Arasha as a religious organization. So I said, pick that one. I said, pick an organization that deals with either, you know, interfaith dialogue, ecumenism, peace and reconciliation. So I told them to pick either Corrymeela or Glencree. Both are in the books. So I said, pick one of them. And then I said, a third one, your third religious organization then is going to be choosing one that deals with justice issues, you know, things like that. So most of them then were picking Throwbury. So I said, you've 3 religious organisations to learn. Arasha for your stewardship, either Corrymeela or Glencree. That gets you out of a hole of peace and reconciliation come up. So it's about me telling them, if you see these words, that's what you're to use. You know, that's the point that I'm at with my classes. So circling that particular question, of course, they all said describe was the action verb, and I said great. And they said, so describe how the work carried out. Religious organization. I said, yeah, great, you're a religious organization. Founding vision. So that threw them a little bit. And again, I said, any organization's founding vision, a religious organization in particular, their founding vision is going to be based on respect everybody, showing care for other people, love one another as I've lived. I said, regardless of the organization, they're all pretty much going to be based on those things, making sure everybody is treated fairly and equally. So I said, if you're asked about what is the founding vision of an organization, if you draw a blank and you can't think, if you have those 4 points in your head, sorry, my lighting is if you have those points in your head, because they want to treat everybody treated fairly, they believe in loving your neighbor as yourself, there's the founding vision. Okay. And I said to them, just know those going in, and that'll apply to nearly any religious organization. The one word that they these lovely kind of biographies or like outline of what Throper is and when it was set up and blah, 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 the history of anything about the work that's being done. So again, just drawing there those kind of little words like that in fact was a big word. A lot of them then, when I said to them, whatever mark I'd given to them, let's say they had gotten 9 out of 15, I'm always saying to mine, at this point, there's no point in having at this stage, no point in having a mock exam in front of you and us going through it, unless you're going to learn, how can I improve on this? Not even, what did you do wrong? I hate saying that to them because it's, how can I improve on this? And when I said to them, okay, look at the mark you got. Can you now tell me, after us going through the question and going through our answer together and looking at the points can you tell me how you could improve? And a lot of them there said, I just talked about the organization as in like the history of it and where it came from, but I didn't mention what they do. So I said, okay, again, a lot of organizations will do similar things. So it may be fundraising, it may be they run educational programs to raise awareness. They bring people together and give them a safe space. So again, giving them 2 or 3 points that regardless of what way the question comes up or for more than one question, they're covered then. So that's my little bit of advice for you of what we've done in the last couple of weeks in my classroom. So I'm going to stop talking and hand you over to Laurie now.
Good, Niamh, you can get a glass of water.
I know.
So you have been busy talking. So Niamh has dealt with, say, the coursework and the work coming up to, say, the mocks and trying to get as much as she can out of the lads. And she's given some really good examples there of how she gets all that data from them. So I said before to you, I teach in an all-girls school. So we would run kind of study workshops and things like that, where the girls themselves would give the study workshops for other students in the school. So when Niamh and I were prepping for this webinar over the last few weeks, I was just asking the girls like the best ways such that they would feel would help them with study. So I suppose we put a few examples up there: revision notes, summaries, flashcards, mind maps, diagrams if they work for you, etc. So I suppose a lot of my students like to use the mind maps and the flashcards. All right. So I suppose what I'm going to be looking at is the next few weeks, trying to drum as much as we possibly can into them. Most of us have finished the course or are finishing it in the next week or whatever. So at this point in time, it's all about revision. And we know that the learners in front of us are all very different. They learn very differently, and therefore we have to adapt to their needs. So it's not about us calling out information or us giving them mind maps. It's about them finding what way they learn best from. So I suppose when I was chatting to my girls about kind of, helping kind of ye on this webinar, we were kind of looking at ways that, they feel would be good for teaching other students about religion and getting them ready for their exams. So I suppose one thing would be the flashcards. My students would love them. Okay, so I asked them, well, why? Why do you like flashcards? So I suppose they said to me they like them because it builds vocabulary, which helps them, I suppose, with those action verbs that Niamh would have been talking about a little bit. What does describe mean? What does outline mean? What does analyze mean? So those kind of words go up on the flashcards. It helps them develop comprehension, but that's not only for religion, that's for every single subject. And it helps them explain things at home as well as everything else. It also, because they're small cards and they carry them around, some of them in my class, it helps them kind of grow in confidence because it strengthens memory. Like, say, Niamh was asking you there a few minutes ago about prayer, okay? I'm very big into keywords. Get the keywords, girls, because by knowing the keywords, you'll be able to write your sentences. So instead of, like, you know, say Niamh was talking about, say, 8 things, she's not talking about 8 sentences. She's talking about 8 keywords, and you can build your sentences around. That's what it's all about, just being really exam savvy at this point in time. And they're visual as well. They highlight them, they have little diagrams, all of that. So that's kind of what they would have said around the flashcards, which works really well for them. So others love the mind maps, okay? And I think the girls in particular love the mind maps. They love the visuals, but it helps them break down any complex kind of concepts that are difficult for them. And Niamh mentioned a few minutes ago about the specification. The language is hard, you know, and therefore we need to be able to build that or break that down into simpler ways, because I've said already, all learners are different. So we need to break that specification down, and that's where those mind maps can come in. Again, like the flashcards, they're visual. They use the color, they have all their highlighters, etc. So they're well able kind of to learn from that. The mind maps as well helps mind plan, okay? They know what they have to do. It's on a page, it's visual, it's clear, it's concise, it's to the point, okay? So they can sit down, learn, say, for 20 minutes and apply that information then to the exam question that's asked. And it also helps them kind of, they share those mind maps between themselves, and it helps them brainstorm as well. So it's like the think per share, helps them, you know, learn with each other. So that's kind of what mine would have said, just to help you in relation to just the next few weeks as such, to get things over the line for your students. Because like, as you said at the beginning, we're all in this together. We all don't know what's going to come up in June 2025, which is really around the corner. So that's that slide, Niamh. I'm just going to move on to the next one. So this is just another exam question. It's another type or style of exam question. Niamh would have looked at different ones. So I suppose kind of it's tying in with the difference between ecumenism and interfaith dialogue. It comes up a lot. It would have come up in the old syllabus, but now very much in the specification. So I suppose if you look at that question, what is the difference between ecumenism and interfaith dialogue? They don't need to be writing a huge amount of information. A few lines, a few sentences is really important, just to get the key things out of the way, okay? Mentioning Christianity in relation to ecumenism is key to getting, you know, the marks for that, okay? Then mentioning the dialogue, what does dialogue mean? Talking between different world religions, okay? So just those key things they do need to know. That question there, exam time, that's another type of question whereby they've to match, okay? So they match the world religion. So you can see the 5 major world religions there. You've Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Hinduism. So linking the world religions to A, B, C, D, and E. But make sure that, you know, if, like I always say to ours, if you're running out of time, make sure you put the letter down. So name the religion, Buddhism. Put the letter opposite, you know, like don't be wasting time writing big sentences out that's on the exam paper already. They're wasting time, and this paper is long. Niamh said already there's no choice. So even when they receive the paper, getting that time to look through, you know, to look at the questions, read the questions, know what's being asked. So tell them not to be wasting question or time there as such, you know. And then the last part is outline. Sorry, Niamh, you're way ahead of me there, Mrs. The last part there is to outline, and you can see kind of like our sample answer underneath, okay? So in this question, you are asked to outline your understanding. Outline means you should set out the main points of information on a topic. So they're kind of the things that I would have done with mine through the flashcards, anything like that, the mind maps. They know exactly what those words mean, and then they set off and they start writing the answer from it. So I suppose keeping the answers precise is really key as well to RE. Answering the question that's asked is so important. Now I can move on, Niamh, there. Okay, I love this part of the RE course, as does Niamh, okay? Like we love storytelling, okay? So I suppose like, when you're going in teaching a difficult concept, it's really important to bring it back to their life, okay? And there's so many things happening in the world at the moment that we can relate to in relation to that difficult specification, those difficult words, etc. Okay? So what I try to do, as does Niamh, is we try to connect what we've learned to real life. These are only 13, 14, 15-year-olds, okay? We need to make connections, okay? And it's really important that we do that to the world that they're living in, okay? But it also helps them remember, right? That, oh yeah, she said, or he said about that example, and then they write it down on the page, and the examiner is impressed with that, okay? So my class always visit a mosque. They love it. What do you see? And Niamh's already done that in relation to the mosque. What do you see? What's happening? What are the colours? What did you do when you went in? All those questions. And they're even asking each other now and then helping each other out with kind of flashcards and that, all right? But there's so many things that we do, like in all the schools around the country, around, say, social justice. One example I do is the hampers for the captions and Bow Street at Christmas time, okay? How is that an example of social justice, I say to the girls? What does it mean when you bring in something? How important is it? Even the whole thing of remembering to go home, take something out of the cupboard, check the date, make sure that, they're picking something out of the cupboard that they would like to eat as well as somebody else would like to eat, okay? So looking after each other, and I know Niamh has mentioned the word respect, which is really key, that we respect every single person that we meet. And that's part of, bringing in something for the hampers as well. Like, on Netflix, The Adolescents, it's really good at the moment around bullying and that. Now, there's some parts I wouldn't necessarily show, but there's parts there that are just so amazing to that documentary. So that's all part of the bullying kind of treating others the way you would like to be treated. Like Beacon Alta, I said at the beginning, I'm a deputy principal, and we're looking at the Beacon Alta. We've our half day next week. What does that mean? It means to be kind. I link that into the golden rule of all the world religions. So all of those connections makes a big difference. The big thing at the moment that I brought into school today was the whole thing of Trump, okay? He stood on that podium last night. He was talking about all those taxes, but who are they going to affect? The poorest of society, okay? So we had a chat around that today. Even the whole thing of withdrawing aid is huge, okay? Who is that going to affect? So again, I would link that back to the whole thing of social justice, okay? Looking after every single person in society, treating everybody equal. So I suppose I hope I've kind of got the point across there. And I know I was probably talking too fast because I was given a lot of examples there. But storytelling is really important because they will remember. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, time management. Okay, now this, the mocks will tell you a lot. Okay, like they have section A, B, and C to do. They've 15 questions in 2 hours. All right. So when they get the paper, it's really important that they take a few minutes just to settle. All right, to breathe. It's a long exam, but they will get through it. Niamh has already said to you that some of the questions are longer than others. Some of them will just require a tick box. That's not going to take long, okay? Where they need to spend time is where Niamh would have said, those boxes where they might have 12, 15 lines, all right? And that's about the sentences and the quality of the sentences. So they need to be thinking, okay? They need to look and see, well, what is that question asking of me? Is it asking me to describe? Is it asking me to outline? Is it asking me to evaluate? Okay, so they need to give a little bit of time before they start putting pen to paper. So I always say to mine, don't start writing immediately. Give yourself a few minutes, settle, look at what your best question is and start at that because that helps you grow in confidence. So those kind of little things makes a big difference because it makes no difference to the examiner which question they will have started kind of first. So remember that exam is 2 hours and remember that they've 15 questions to do. So giving themselves enough time for that. Okay. I just want to make sure I've said everything on. Oh yeah, just they need to keep moving on. All right. They can't spend too long on one question. Okay. So they need to keep an eye on the clock. And they need to just make sure that they're answering those long questions. Yeah, that's fine on that one, Niamh. Yeah. Okay, so they need to read every question carefully. And that's why I said to you at the beginning, to get the exam question and to spend a little bit of time. I always say to mine, highlight what they're asking, okay? And it's really good for students that when they're looking at some of those pages, there's an awful lot of text on because there could be a source question. So all they see are words, 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 all right? So if they've their highlighter, highlight, discuss, highlight, evaluate, highlight, describe, highlight, state, whatever it is, okay? Because that will help them as they move on, okay? Keep their questions to the point, okay? They can give their examples, they're really important, but stick to the facts, okay? And answer the question that's asked, and highlighting it or underlining it will help them do that. Okay, calm. I think it's really important for us at this stage to be calm, all right? They will do it. They will be fine, okay? And it is great on the day of the exam when you're there after it and you're asking them how they did. And it was brilliant. It was great. And I remember doing that or whatever. So I suppose it's building confidence, it's building self-esteem with them at this stage. And we know as teachers, we are the professionals. We have been in the classroom a long time. You know the specification. You know what to expect from them. So I suppose it's just to keep building confidence in them that they know they too can and not to be worrying about, I suppose, small little things. Okay. Thanks, Niamh.
No bother, Laura. Thanks a million.
We're on to the booklet now, are we?
Yeah, well, just when you were talking, it came into my head as well. When you were saying about, taking your time. That's so true. Again, the question that I had referenced before I finished talking was the one about where they had to talk about a religious organization. What was it? Describe how the work carried out by a religious organization expresses its founding vision. And that was a part A. And then the part B was describe how another religious organization promotes one of the following, and it was justice or well-being. So what a lot of mine did was they talked about, say, Trócaire for the first part, and then they went to part B and they said, oh, I don't know well-being. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what they, a group that promotes well-being. And I've already used my kind of justice one. So I said to them, like, just be very careful by reading the whole lot of the question. Don't just look at part A and start writing. As Laurie said, take the time, take the breath, read all parts of the question so that you don't use, like I said, in that example, they needed to be careful which one they use for each part of the question. So it's just about, I said to mine, they have about 7 minutes per question. That's allowing 5 minutes at the beginning just to read the paper and do that kind of settling. And then 10 minutes at the end. And I do think it's worthwhile taking that 10 minutes at the end, because that's where I said to mine, use that 10 minutes. If you haven't referred back to the question in one of those longer questions, that's where you do your so this shows us how, and you're repeating the question. But what it does is it leaves the examiner, when an examiner is looking at that, they're after reading through the answer, and then if they see that question, that's like it'll almost tick the box for them. Oh yeah, this student has done what the question asked. So as Laurie said, it's about working clever at this point. So yeah, we came up with the idea, and a huge thanks to Rochelle and Edco, because we only threw this idea at her about 48 hours ago. But again, it came up from being in class. I found there were a couple of students in my class who were just a little bit lost. And so I wanted to try and come up with a way, if they see this word, this is what's required. So basically, we came up with this idea of a revision booklet. So you can either, print it out and give it to your classes, or you can put it up on the board, get them to take it down. But basically what it kind of did was I just went through the chapters in the book, in the reflections book, which are obviously all based on the spec, and just came up with the main for each chapter, each topic, one question and answer, very simple. So for example, what is sectarianism? What causes it? How can it be prevented? It's conflict between. So it's a question and answer. So that, again, for students maybe who would struggle a little bit more, oftentimes, like our third year parent teacher meeting, I had parents sitting in front of me saying, like, I don't know what to do. How can he study? How can he improve the mark? So by giving them this little revision booklet, even if they have like that help at home, that a parent can ask them the question and they're the answer that they're looking for, it can be helpful rather than a whole textbook. So I'm saying to those ones who, as I said, maybe now, obviously this is not giving them the full answer. They have to elaborate on these, but at least they know the absolute basics. And even, if that's all they knew and they didn't elaborate on anything, if that's all they knew going into the exam, they'd nearly have enough. Sorry, I downloaded, Rochelle, the one that just had the first 3 pages, but I know the full booklet is there now. That was my boo-boo, sorry. But I think it's about 6 pages. So like I said, I've just finished putting it together. So I'm going to print that off and give it to mine. They can use it working in pairs. They can bring it home. It'll just, rather than particularly for the week, the students who maybe struggle, the revision booklet will, Rochelle, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So that's going to be sent over to everyone who registered to this webinar, actually. So alongside the recording of this webinar, the PowerPoint and the booklet will be sent over as well.
Brilliant.
Great,
Thanks, Rochelle. So yeah, you'll be able to get the booklet. And hopefully, as I said, I'm just going to kind of work through that with the more able students. And as Laurie said, we have to, with students of all different abilities who learn differently sitting in front of us. So this, I feel, just on its own will help those students maybe who are overwhelmed by a whole textbook and what do I have to revise? Can you shorten it down for me? So if they knew nothing else but what these questions and answers, they'd definitely have enough to pass and do even better than passing. And then obviously the more able ones, they're just using these questions and answers kind of as a jumping off point, I suppose. They can elaborate on each of those then. But it is said it hits pretty much every single topic, every chapter in the book, just with one question and answer. So I think you will find it useful. Yeah, I think that's it. I suppose at this point is really if anybody has any questions or if anybody has any things that have worked well for them in the last few weeks. Are you concerned about anything in particular? Anything at all, please feel free to throw into the chat box.
We actually have one there from Ashlyn. She sent this earlier on. So the question she has is, if you studied Hinduism, there is no known founder. What exactly do you write on if the question is on a founder?
Yeah. Laura?
They'll accept creator. They accept like the Brahma as the creator of that, because I suppose it is the one world religion that doesn't have the single founder, doesn't have the single scripture or set of teachings. So they will accept that. And it's a really interesting religion to do. So it's great to see that it is being taught in the classrooms. Yeah.
Another question here, is there a chapter on religious organizations and reflections?
So it's not one chapter per se. They're spread throughout the book. So I literally spent the other day, if you go through either reflections or a question of faith, and we kind of did it together and it was another way again for my students who would struggle. I said to them, right, I want you to work in 3 groups and I want you to come up with, go through your book now. It was also a way of just getting them to go back through the textbook and to see, then they were saying, oh, I remember this or I remember that, or you know what I mean? So even that in itself, with the class maybe who struggles with weaker students, right, go back and go through the book and see if you can find religious organization. They're all there. They're scattered throughout the book. And then you tell us what page they're on. And I put it up on the board then. So I'm like, brilliant, you found that one. Tell everybody what page it's on. So again, it's about them taking a little bit of ownership and, them feeling, yeah, I have found the correct thing I'm going to use here in the exam. But there's loads of them all throughout the book.
Perfect. There's another question here from Con. I'm asking, any ideas, please, on possible predictions for 2025 exam?
Oh, crystal ball, Niamh, magic wand. Well, I look, obviously we don't, but I mean, I would always be saying the world religions are a huge, huge part of the exam questions, and the students really need to know like the founders, the script, all of that, the books, everything to do with the world religion. So you're safe enough when they know different aspects of that.
I have that in the revision booklet where I say, be able to name the founder, the sacred text, the building, a leader title. They're kind of the 5 or
Pilgrimage.
6 main
Yeah.
things. And then, like, I would always, again, it's about being clever. Look, we don't know what's going to come up. Obviously, I'd love to have predictions. But again, by cutting it down and saying pick 3 religious organizations, or I would always say to mine, choose the thing that there's a lot to say. So, for example, anything to do with prayer, mine always use Islam to answer on, because there's so much to talk about in prayer in Islam. So I'm saying, rather than going with Christianity or whatever, you're talking about prayer in Islam, you can talk about the preparation, you know, wudu, you can talk about the rak'ah, the movements, you can talk, you know, facing Mecca. There's so much. So I say to them, pick those things to revise. So at this stage, it's about trying to cut down the revision maybe a little bit. I would always say as well, to know the creation story and care for the earth, I think could come up this year. So care for the earth and also the creation stories, I would say definitely know as well.
Because sustainability is huge as well, isn't it, Niamh? Really through, you know, across the board. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't think we have any more questions. A lot of feedback though. People saying thank you for a really great webinar. So yeah, and they're excited about the revision booklet. So that's good. Yes. Oh, there's one that came in. Okay, so I'm teaching in a school this year, and they don't teach religion as an exam subject at all. A student approached me today about taking Leaving Cert religious education as an additional subject outside school. Can anyone share advice I could give her, please?
So there's no Leaving Cert religion in school then, in that person's school at all? Like, is it no exam Leaving Cert religion? No?
Yes, they don't teach religion as an exam subject at all.
But the student would
But
like
the
to do it.
student wants to do a
Okay.
Leaving Cert.
I would say reach out to nearby schools. It has happened before in the area near me where we have it as an exam subject, Leaving Cert, in my school. And I know a teacher in a nearby school had a situation like that. And they reached out to our school and said, look, I have a student here who's interested in doing it. I don't know a lot about it. Is there anybody there, say, who's interested in maybe taking on grinds, you know, to help the student? And also when it came to things like doing their project, you know, things like that. So I would say reach out to nearby schools, find out what schools have it around, and also use, you know, the religion teachers groups that you see online and things like that. They can be really, really helpful.
That's perfect. I think that's really great advice. Hopefully that helps Jessie. Jessie was the one who asked the question. Okay. If you have, there's another one here. Can a time of pilgrimage such as Hajj be used as a time of religious significance, or does it have to be Lent?
I would say, again, like I always say to my students, go with the thing that's most obviously correct. So I'll tell you, right, as a previous, Laurie and I were both chief advising examiners for the State Exams Commission in a past life. Using that kind of answer, I guarantee an examiner will have to check with their advising examiner and the chief. Is it okay? And I always say to my students, stay away from an answer that says, is it okay to use that? See if you have something more obvious. That would be my advice on it.
I agree with that.
You know, they will absolutely, they're not going to get 0 for that. But I would say go with the more obvious thing, you know, like a time of significance like Ramadan or Lent or whatever, rather than the
pilgrimage.
Yeah. It's easier as well to keep it distinct for the students themselves, you know, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Annette. If you have any more questions, please feel free to pop them in. Otherwise, just going to remind you that this is being recorded. So we will send an email out to you with a copy of this webinar recording, as well as the revision booklet and also the PowerPoint presentation, if that might help you as well. But yeah, and feel free to share this with your colleagues or just maybe send it to your students, might help them as well. If you don't have any more questions, we're going to end this webinar now. And feel free to just email us at info@edcolearning.ie. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you, Laurie and Niamh, for such a wonderful webinar. Really appreciate your help this evening.
No problem. Thanks for having us. And thanks everybody for logging on a beautiful evening. I'm sure you'd rather be out walking the dog or something else. So thank you.